Awesome.
There we go.
So I wanted to just continue our discussion of vulnerability, and I feel like that the discussion we've been having is one very much rooted and based in vulnerability. So I think we're in a good place, and I think it's going to serve as a really nice backdrop for this conversation. I want to start tonight by looking at vulnerability as a test or a benchmark. So often I think we look at tests in a negative way. But I feel like they are extremely positive in truly telling us where we are. And just as an example, I can feel like I'm at a certain place, say with my weight. And I can go weeks or days or months without ever getting on the scale. But then I get on the scale and I know exactly where I am. I feel like we can use vulnerability as a gauge for where we are in our lives, in our journey. I feel like it is a test of our sense of security. Secure people can be vulnerable. Insecure people are often defensive, maybe even attacking, distracting, but they usually are not, this is me, this is who I am. I feel like our levels of vulnerability can show us our level of self-love, self-acceptance. We talk about there are certain people for us, certain communities, certain groups that are safe places, safe spaces. And I think that's true. And I think we all have to sort of navigate who we are most vulnerable around and with, and who is a safe place and who is not. And without discounting that, without saying that's not important, because it is, and vulnerability to be healthy, must come with boundaries. However, with all that said, I feel like when we are truly accepting ourselves, we can choose, celebrate vulnerability, and whether we're in a safe space or not, it's sort of beside the point, because we are being, and here's another huge test of vulnerability. Our level of vulnerability actually, I believe, exposes our authenticity. If I'm doing that thing where I put my best foot forward, and I try to look my best and do my best and come across as I'm an authority and I'm a this and I'm a that, and I'm successful or am I authentic and I feel like my best authentic, self-loving, self-accepting self is going to be the most vulnerable, and be the most vulnerable the most often, be the most vulnerable as a lifestyle. Now, I want to share one more thing, and then I'm going to turn it over and get your response and anything you want to say. I had what I believe was a spiritual awakening at an early age in life, and it set me on a path. I was looking for a way to translate that into serving, to trying to make the world a better place. And I had some notions about that. And then, of course, when you have an awakening, when you have a spiritual or religious experience, often, I certainly did, you turn to elders, you turn to supposed experts, and they'll tell you, well, this is how you serve. This is what you do. This is, And so, very, very early in life, I went into ministry. And I went in so early, say by 14, 15, I was leading youth groups. I had a band doing religious music. We had a drama team doing drama. I would teach and speak and preach, and we'd travel all over the South and do these things. And I think because I was so young, I really felt the need to be perfect. There was I think there was an insecurity about my age, and I was trying to. And even when I graduated Bible college, I was 22 years old, but most people said I looked about 14. And part of, I think, wearing a clerical collar. I mean, the church I came out of, the college I went to, and all that was a part of it. So it was just being a part of that tradition, part of that group. But it was a choice. We could each choose to or not to, and I felt with my youth and everything else. And I remember when I came to the point just a few years later at 24, 25 maybe. I mean, I had been at this point before, like at probably 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. But from say 18 to 24, so that's the bracket. So before and then around 25, I realized that organized religion just wasn't for me, and I wasn't for it. When I took off the collar and when I really, I think for the not the first time in my life, but for one of the most important times in my life, I feel like I took a step towards authenticity and went from trying to, I'm sorry to keep using this cliche, but putting my best foot forward or trying to not only be something, but also appear to be that thing. I felt like I got, far more real. And I remember being at one of the kids' little league games. My whole family sitting up there, and I had a shirt on, T-shirt that said, "To be honest with you, I'm a liar." And my sister started talking about. She says, my girls, they love their Uncle Michael, but they have a hard time understanding him. They have some questions, and I just thought, that was I was being me. I was trying to be, and maybe I was taking a step. I was stepping towards authenticity. And I just feel like that was the right step for me. And I feel like I've been on that journey, that path ever since. And I think a test, a gauge for me about where I really am is how authentic am I being? Do I get in a situation where I try to appear to be something I'm not, or try to defend or protect or, hide behind something? Or am I just being? Am I just am? And that is vulnerable. And I think that is authentic. For years now, for pushing 30 years, I have written as openly and as vulnerably as I possibly can. And then I take it and I give it to others and say, tell me what you think about it. Give me feedback. Help me make it better. I do that. That's a vulnerable thing to give them your work. And then, of course, it's a vulnerable thing to put it out into the world. And for the last few years, I've been doing that same thing with songs. And just this week, I sent a brand new song to a fellow songwriter, and I said, and this is someone that I knew would rip it apart. And I knew in that process I could make it better with his help, with his feedback. That's an act of vulnerability. And I feel like that is a gauge, a reading for where we really are. Agree, disagree? Any thoughts, or take us in a new direction, whatever you want to do.
Well, I'm I'm thinking about um, what one of the IFS stories of you going golfing in India or Malaysia or whatever, and you hit the ball, and there's monkeys on the golf course, and they pick the ball up, and what do? And you play where the monkey drops the ball, you know,
Hmm.
and and you know, obviously, kind of doing that in relationships as a therapist, um, but I think in regards to authenticity, recognizing it's okay wherever this ball is dropped, I can just be real
Hmm.
because that's where I am. I don't have to pretend to be, you know, at, another place on the course.
Okay.
I can just be here. Um, as you're talking, I read something the other day written by the Surgeon General that is stepping down, when Biden leaves. And he was talking about health, about mental health, about just well-being. And he said the three most important things, in his experience for well-being and health was having relationship, uh, having providing service, having a sense of giving service to others, and having a purpose.
Hmm.
And then he went on, and you can probably guess. Well, you'll read where I think it goes a little bit, but he said, so often, he's concerned that we people, the world, being of the world, he didn't say that, but we end up making those three priorities instead of relationship, purpose, and service. We make it wealth, fame, and power.
Hmm.
Right? Wealth, fame, and power. And that is, maybe it's not the opposite of authenticity, but yeah.
Yes. And those three things you're talking about require vulnerability. Vulnerability
Yeah.
is our place of
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about connection. Yes. It's about connection within, connection with others, connection. Yeah. It's connection. Where wealth, money, and power aren't about connection. They're about this. Instead of here, it's here.
Mm.
You know, and being vulnerable, this isn't vulnerable. To be vulnerable, you got to be here.
And one of
Yeah.
those, like the wealth, fame, and power feeds the ego, where the others feed the soul. That
Yeah.
core essence of who you are and your core needs.
Absolutely.
Something that hit me last time after we talked is that authenticity's come up a lot tonight, and it came up a lot last time we talked about vulnerability. And it kind of struck me that vulnerability without the authenticity is really fragility. And I saw that a lot in my former life. I was not comfortable with myself. I had a lot of issues. I wasn't particularly kind, and I had a very fragile ego. Like anything got to me. If if I didn't make everybody in the room happy, I went home and spun that in my head and realized, tried to figure out how I could have done better or what I did wrong, and just beat myself up over it a lot. And since I've become who I am now, that stuff doesn't get to anymore. I've come to realize that if I put myself out there, I'm not going to be for everybody, and I'm not going to make everybody happy necessarily always, but I'm not offensive and I don't take offense to them. So it really has made for a better situation and allowed me to be more vulnerable in every situation. Like I don't have to hide imperfections. I don't have to, put on this macho air of look at me, I'm perfect, I'm the boss, I'm whatever, that I used to live in that state. And it was a horribly unauthentic state. And there wasn't a lot of vulnerability. There was a lot of anger and there was a lot of fragile emotions that came out of that just really made me not the greatest person. It served me well because I was a good actor, and I I use that to be the hard boss and the hard worker, and I valued myself by my work, not by my person. So it served me, but it was not a particularly vulnerable or authentic place of being. It was really defining myself by who I was, by the power I had, by the fame, not the fame, but the wealth I accumulated as a boss, the rising positions at work. So yes, I can see that. And like now, I laughed. I moved into this house. It's like 1,200 square feet, and you would have thought it was a mansion moving in here. Like I was so happy about this place and redecorated it to be what I want it to be. Like all that other stuff, the big house, the big stuff didn't matter anymore. It was actually being who I am and making my whole world be about who I am, and that's just been an amazingly affirming and happy place to be.
It's got to help that it's the coolest place in Panama City. I mean, that's
Gentopia.
definitely.
When you were talking, Jennifer, about vulnerability and weakness, um, I was thinking about this practice. It's part of Tai Chi. It's not the moving meditation, um, but it's something you do with another person, and it's called push hands. And it's really not about pushing, and it's really not about hands, but it's you are kind of up. You're facing the person, and both of you are right here, and you're just kind of moving back and forth, right? And the the object isn't to make the other person fall. The object is to take yourself into where we could call it flexibility. And physiologically, the more flexible you are, the more adept you are at doing this. But of course, this is, there's layers of this. There's physiologically flexible, also speaking to being, flexible. And um, so when you're doing this, and then one person will fall, or they'll kind of come off their grounding. And it isn't that that person has lost or the other person has won. Uh, it's 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 a lesson in one partner is helping the other person come up to their limits and recognize where they're holding,
Mm.
right? And as you continue this, you come up to where you're holding and you learn to soften. Vulnerable. You learn to soften. And the more you do this, the softer you become, on different layers. And the more vulnerable you become. And there is a story in this Tai Chi book I have. In so many words, the strongest things are the softest things. And he talks about cotton being compressed and compressed and compressed and compressed together. And you could shoot an arrow and it won't go through. It'll stop. It won't break it, but it'll stop it. But we're talking about softness
Right.
compressed. And when I think about how I've come to know you, Michael, and what I've known about your life and your relationships, I think of you as someone who has a lot of compressed cotton,
Mm.
you know, that there's a real security there. Um, and it's been there for a long, long time. We've talked a little bit about your family of origin and, your early life and then experiences you had, like this religious experience. But the more condensed and softer we become, the more we're able to move in whatever direction, here, without without breaking,
That's
even though we're
beautiful.
being very vulnerable.
Right. So I want to talk about that, and then Jasmine will come to you. But Bob, what you're talking about is really, I think the paradox, I think it's paradoxical what you're saying. And I think that, I think about perception of strength versus weakness. And when it comes to truth, when it comes to spiritual things, it is very often the opposite of conventional wisdom. Very often in life, those who appear to be losing, those who appear not to be winning this rat race, not to be winning the things we were talking about, fame, fortune. What was the other one?
Um,
Power. Oh yeah,
power.
power.
Yeah.
Wealth, power. Yeah, whatever. And it just, to me, Jesus encapsulate it. He is quintessentially this: the appearance of loss, the teaching of absolute vulnerability, which that is strength. Paradoxically, ironically, those that appear the strongest and have the most armor are the weakest. They're the most afraid. And I want to talk about for a moment world leaders, those that rise to lead countries, corporations, religious sects. It's very often those who appear to be strong, those who appear to, and we see in the world a desire for huge swaths of the population for leaders like that. Leaders who have no questions, just answers, who have no doubt, just certainty. And I think the one of the greatest things I think you could say, there's so many wonderful things we could say about Jimmy Carter. Wonderful, wonderful things. And as we're recording this, he's just passed away recently. But if you look at how he governed, if you look at how he approached politics, there was a lot of openness. There was not much rigidity. And so a certain part of the population wanting certainty and wanting a certain perception of strength saw it as weakness. And we've seen since then politicians who change, everything's changed now, but previously to this last 8 years or so, a politician who changed their mind publicly was called a flip-flopper, was just denigrated for being open. They were considered weak. And so when we talk about perception of weakness versus strength, to me, the greatest single example of this is love. I think, feel free to disagree, love is the most powerful and the weakest force in the world. It operates only by invitation. It is so easily rejected. It's cotton, right? It's water. It's wind. And think about how many different definitions of love we have, and we have a hard time, I think, grasping what it is. I feel like it is, among many other things, the opposite of fear. And I feel like vulnerability is synonymous with courage, the courage to be ourselves. That means the courage to love ourselves with all our imperfections, with all that we still need to address and grow and deal with and evolve and become. It's like, God damn it, I love me just as I am. And in doing that, I'm just going to be. And in doing that, I can let others just be. Jasmine, you want to respond to any of that or take us in a new direction? Anything you want to?
Goodness. Trying to think where to even start. I
didn't mean
was
to put
really,
you on the spot.
it's all right.
And I'm also wondering, before we got on here, you were sharing about some things that you've been dealing with at school and
Yeah.
that have been right there in your face related to all of these things and
Yes.
vulnerability.
Yes. Yes. So I was thinking a good bit about, as you all were speaking about authenticity. And I was really trying to reflect and, on a scale of 1 to 10, how authentic am I? And for me, it's still a little bit difficult to really honestly answer that question, not just because I overanalyze words and things, but because I was trying to think, some of the things I've experienced recently is, for most of my life, I didn't have favorites, not a favorite color, not a favorite song. Like I could give you my top 10, my favorite handful of genres. Like, I remember years ago, when I was planning to be married, in lieu of a typical engagement sort of thing, we got a souped up car stereo. That was our, you know, whatever kind of gift you want to call it to one another. And as we're at the local car stereo shop, getting the get to hear the performance of this new beast of a system, pull out. Remember the days when you had those big old cases of your CDs to keep it from scratch and all that?
Still have them.
Yes. So I had everything from Stanley Clark, who's a jazz musician that I learned about in my music appreciation class, to Elton John, Garth Brooks, classical music, some Aerosmith, some old school R&B. I think I had some like Gladys Knight and the Pips. I had Snoop Dogg, a little bit of Warren G, like everything.
And also Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith and Stephen Curtis
at
Chapman.
Actually, I only had Newsboys, but yes, there was a time. But I think I may have still had a little bit of DC Talk before they went grunge, if a little bit of Petra. But the guy that was doing our stereo system, he's flipping through. He's like, normally I have to use my own music to really showcase someone's system, like the hi-hat cymbals and the deep bass. And he's like, whose music is all of this? It's like, it's mine. And my point being that on the one hand, I've considered myself for quite some time, very well-rounded, very somewhat of a chameleon. I can kind of blend in, fit anywhere. But some of it also is, we may need to edit this. Is it okay to share about us, Michael?
You can share whatever you want.
Okay.
And we can edit whatever we want to.
Okay. So by way of example, and I think I might be a little bit better about this now, but like when Michael and I were first reconnecting and, planning to go eat dinner or, whatever the case may be, a simple question like, what do you feel like eating? Whatever you'd like. And it's not, I did have a problem with being a people pleaser for quite some time, but I just, I was kind of thinking this through as you guys were talking, like how I got to the point where I just really, wasn't that I didn't have an opinion, but I didn't necessarily have a preference. It's like, did I really have that much of an issue with commitment, or is it an issue of being defensive, like Michael spoke about, not being vulnerable? And I think there was some things that from a very young age, I cannot remember a time when I didn't think that my role in life was to provide service to others, to put others. I felt like it was a moral value to value others more than myself. And so I can remember some conversations with Michael. We were talking about self-care, and I was thinking, well, there's a difference between self-care and selfish, because certain things that other people view as self-care, I felt like, that those are luxury items. They don't really contribute to the world. You know what I mean? And so long way of saying it's as some things that's kind of been going through my mind as we were speaking now, and as you guys were speaking, is you know, to really know yourself, right? I think is important to truly be authentic and to be like, as Jen spoke to, being comfortable in your own skin, being okay with elements of rejection or people disagreeing with you or not approving of you. And certainly for quite some time, or longer period of my life than I would like to be true, I definitely did not. I think approval was more important than I realized, but I think I had a very strong perception that there was a lot of disapproval, and so it's interesting. Like a simple question: what would you like to eat? I don't have an opinion, or
Well, it
what's your
doesn't
favorite color?
help.
What's your favorite food? Go ahead.
Doesn't help that the first time you chose, it was the worst Mexican restaurant in the world, in the known world, at least in the Western world, right? So, so after that, you were probably gun shy of choosing.
Accurate, but that was an element. But I remember even, when we had some of the early conversations, what's your favorite pizza? Or just, the conversation you have when you're reconnecting with someone or connecting in a new way, or what's your not favorite, your favorite food? And Michael could easily answer pizza. And I'm like, well, there's so many things I like. And so I was just thinking about that, like how I reached a point, well into adulthood. I'm not talking like I wasn't 20. This is in my mid to late 40s where, I don't even know how to really describe that state of being where you're, the way that you identify and that sort of thing. Because, like, harkening back to my tale of my uh, diverse CDs, I remember the technician that was installing the stereo saying like, who are your people? And I'm like, oh, all the people.
All the people.
All the people, I'm not, and that can be a good way to be, but there are people that you more deeply resonate with when you're able to be authentic, when you're able to be vulnerable, be vulnerable, be open and honest. And I don't think I really fully appreciate it until we start having this conversation, start contemplating it. And, the past handful of years, as I've really worked on being truly, fully healthy, I don't think I realized how much, I consider myself a very open person, and I was always open and honest. And most people would not have described me as intensely shy or as introverted, because there was so much that was going on behind. I don't know that I really felt of as putting my best foot forward or having a mask, but I was just very private and had a knack for getting people to share about themselves so they feel connected to you, right? But you don't really have to open up. And there's a circle of friends that I had in my late 20s, early 30s, that one of the guys in our group used to joke that, none of them could run for office or do certain public service or anything that brought them into spotlight without paying me very well, because I was the keeper of all the secrets. But people didn't really know about me, except for that after everyone went out, I went to church on Sunday morning and they were still in bed or still out, that kind of thing. But I was just thinking about that. I don't think that I felt like I was authentic and genuine, but I don't think I realized how much I held back, and how different I am now, how giving myself permission to do things that even a handful of years ago, if I thought it was okay to take belly dancing classes, I would not share that with my colleagues. Whereas now I'm like, no judgment. It is what it is, So I don't know that I answered about authenticity and vulnerability, other than just this has been a really a reflection opportunity for me that areas where, like Michael spoke to, like taking your own measure, getting on that scale, so to speak, of realizing how much I've grown, but how much room there is for growth to really, truly be comfortable with all of you. I feel very comfortable. I feel safe. I feel like I'm being vulnerable, but I don't feel vulnerable, if that makes sense. But that is not, I'm trying to think of when that's been the case for the most part over the course of my life. And even among people that I would consider close, I don't think that's been the case until recently.
I want all of you to think about, is there any group, any institution, anything you were a part of growing up that encouraged vulnerability? Religion said you need to be this way, you need to do these things. Family dynamics usually are saying, especially like how does the outside world see our family, right? Don't
Mm-hmm.
betray the family myth. School, peers, who encouraged us to be vulnerable? Did anybody?
I don't think so. I think vulnerability is a little bit of something that makes people feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I you talked about, having to be guarded, like, and I have a friend that says she can't be her authentic self around certain people. And I think that's the case. And I told her that, like, eventually you can be, eventually you become your authentic self. But when you're first starting out and you're being vulnerable and being authentic, it's going to be a little bit too much to people. And you need to be in a group of friends or a safe space where you can have that fostered until you can become that person you know you should be. Like, I don't think I really had a group of friends that really supported me until the first year I came out, and I met some people that just supported me to no end. Like, it makes me tear up thinking about it. Like, they never questioned my gender, they never questioned anything. It was just pure support, and you don't get that a lot. And I find that more and more that I open up with people, and I'm able to counsel people and stuff. Like, we have those relationships where it's just pure support, and there's no judgment or shame or guilt about telling somebody or feeling somebody with it, and it's just an amazing thing. Sorry, I got all teary eyed and kind of
No, it makes
lost
me
lost track a little bit.
I want to tell you, I was listening to a lady's story this week of her most vulnerable moment, and I broke down crying. She is very similar to what you're talking about, and that is until we express vulnerability, we're not giving others much opportunity to do much for us. Last week, I shared with y'all a couple of times where I was in a situation where I needed help or needed, to make things go more smoothly. And I approached my family, and they couldn't have been more supportive. And I've had that happen with so often with friends. And I know before we started recording, we were just talking. My level of connection with you all is directly related to how vulnerable we are. Just that we're sharing about our days and about our struggles and what's happening. And that's just gives such an opportunity for connection.
And that was one of those things. Like, you referenced talking before, but, like, I've thought for years that I have finally got my stuff together. I've been on a healing journey. I really thought I had my stuff together. And this year, like I was saying earlier, like, I've realized I've got some underlying stuff that I'm not even aware of. So sometimes that authenticity is derailed by stuff you don't even know about. And
Right.
I wouldn't say derailed, but it puts a different focus on it. Like, I realize now that I still have a ways to go in my healing journey, and I don't know what it is, but I see behaviors I did as coping mechanisms in the past when I was really struggling. I'm doing the same things today that I did when I was, super depressed and on the verge of suicide. And it makes no sense today to me because I have an amazing life. I have an amazing friends. I have, everything going my way, but there's still something that I'm not aware of. And, that's what we're talking about. Sometimes you can be authentic, but still have things you need to uncover and work on that are deep seated and affect you in ways you don't even know about.
Right.
This year, well, the last several months, one of the things that I keep, kind of reflecting on is, so my dad passed in 1984, and I was really thinking about why, 40 years ago, and this is the most I have missed him, the most I feel like I've mourned and grieved him, and I was really thinking about, why that was the case, and I think a large part of it is, 40 years later, this is the safest I've felt to really go through that process. Like, I've for variety of reasons that we could do a whole entire series on probably. There was certainly some defensiveness and some somewhat maladaptive coping mechanisms, but just really not having the safety to like when we're going through grief, I feel like that is a time of definite vulnerability, and it's a transition, and there's we all process grief in different stages, and just there's no definite timeline, but I think there was just until now the need that I felt, the overwhelming need I felt was to keep one foot in front of the other, keep going, you can't look back. Like, wasn't that I didn't miss him all that time, but I think this is the first time it's really felt safe to just there's times just cry and just really sit with it a little bit, like in a way that I hadn't been able to before. And of course, I was 8 when I lost him, so your cognitive skills and your insight and things, you handle grief differently, and but it's certainly, as you all know, I had a day where we were dealing with grief with some of the students that I work with, and I was thinking, man, I thought a lot today, like, what did I need when I was 8? Or
Mm.
what do I have needed at when I was in high school, at the high school where I work and was a senior, one of my childhood friends from 2nd grade through our senior year was murdered. And, so I was really thinking, I was remembering how different that situation was to the grief that our students were dealing with today, and the support that we have and the insight that we have as an education system, and that sort of thing to support the students and the families, but also just personally, like when I was a teenager and I was about to embark on the wide world, and suddenly faced with losing a peer, what would I have needed, that really struck me today, that how much how much safer I feel now than I've ever felt, which sometimes it's I think very often it's the opposite. As we go through life and more occurs, we build barriers, or there's things that cause us to feel less safe or less secure, and sometimes we have the faith of a child, where I feel like when you have a tragedy like that, as a young person, especially at 8, you don't have some of those same the innocence of childhood, for lack of a better term. But
Your vulnerability earlier is what led you to this compassion and empathy, and to be able to ask that question, what did I need?
mhm,
What you're saying is you had a need at that time. That's
yeah,
vulnerability. That vulnerability is a need. You had that, you experienced that, and now you're using that to help others with needs. That's incredible.
Before we started, and I was thinking a little bit about our topic for tonight, and um, what I've been noticing this last week, as I've kind of stopped. Am I coming in and out, or am I clear?
You're clear.
you're clear.
I'm clear. Okay, it's just my thing. Well, so I have been allowing myself to be more present to pain and discomfort, and the more I allow myself to sit with that, the more secure and confident I become. Um, in Tai Chi Taoism, they talk about investing in loss. That's what this thing that I was talking about, this push hands. It's you go to the place where you have a loss, and you go there, and then you go back, and you go, and then you find another place where you have a loss, and you keep going to these places, and we could call it loss, discomfort, pain, vulnerability. And as you become more open and able and willing to be there, and there's less resistance, then the magic of security and confidence starts happening. Um, and I was earlier, before we started recording, was hearing Jennifer talk about, certain kind of things. I don't know, she didn't use the word addictions, but I think about the things that that really get me, um, and food and sweets are like one and two, right up there. And of course, since we've become technologically more advanced, then my phone is my other big drug. Um, but I've been this week becoming more, and I've experienced this before, and then I go back. But this week I've been noticing my craving, noticing that urge to have something to eat, and and sometimes it's the behavior, and sometimes it's just the thought, and allowing myself to begin thinking about or fantasizing about, and it's even more subtle. And there I go. And how do I, okay, stop and just breathe. And, ooh, I don't like, I'm uncomfortable. And oh yeah, that's why I was going there. I was going there to get away from this, but that doesn't serve me.
I think it's very helpful to think about what do we turn to resist vulnerability, to resist anything, to resist love, to distract ourselves. And we've talked a little bit, we touched on distraction. If am I going to sit with this discomfort, this pain, this just existential fill in the blank, or am I going to eat something sweet? Am I going to jack off? Am I going to put on a movie? And am I going to buy something? Am I going to go try to help someone else with their shit where I don't even have to think about mine? Mm-hmm. Am I going to what? I mean, there's any, obviously drugs and alcohol and food and or we can be with, we can sit with it.
This, I remember this fire talk, or it was a campfire talk, camp for high schoolers. And I was a young counselor. I was 20 or 21. And this older, man who started it. He started it back in like the late 60s, and he hadn't been involved for a while, but they had him come up to do some of the campfire talks. And he was Armenian, and he just helped bring a very different lens to how you, and in this, it was kind of hearing some of Jesus's stories and parables. But one thing, it's what I hold that holds me. It's what I hold that holds me. And that,
mm-hmm.
And you've talked a little bit about manifesting, I think, Jennifer and Michael. That's something that I know you're reading a book about, but it's even, what does my intention hold? And then that's holding me too.
But it's not the intention that matters. Intention is actually clarifying what you want, and that's one of the most challenging things I think in manifesting is most people don't have a clear idea of what they want. And one of the things that's big about manifesting is that what you think you want is not necessarily, you have the sponsoring thought that's underneath. For instance, like, I would love to have a yacht. I think that's the coolest thing in the world, a yacht, cruise around on it. But underlying, I've had boats throughout my life at period in different times, and I know they're expensive. The motors don't run. When you get ready to go out, you gotta, something's not working, and you gotta scramble to do it. When you come in, you gotta wash them off. Like, there's all this work that goes into a boat, and I have a idea in my head that it's a hole in the water you throw money into. So am I ever going to get a yacht? No, because my sponsoring thought says I don't like boats really. I think they're a thing. So there's that holds people back from manifestation. but the biggest thing the thing, and I think it's not the intention that's the problem, but it's the attachment. It's the attachment to how you're going to get there. It's an attachment to the outcome. It's an attachment to the
Yeah.
thing. And if you're not crystal clear on what you want, you're attached to something that has nebulous. So I think intention is actually the only important part of manifestation. Like, but your intention has to not conflict with underlying sponsoring thoughts, and you have to have no attachment to that, and you have to be appreciative of where you are, because you can't manifest something in your life if you aren't ready to receive it. And if
Mm.
I've had a thing where I use video games as an escape. We talked about this earlier. If I'm sitting on my couch playing a video game for 4 hours a day, I'm not ready to receive great things right now, because I'm squandering the time I have. I'm squandering the energy I have. I'm spending money and squandering the money I have. So that's going to hold you back from manifesting great things too. So, I mean, I think those are the intention is the good part. The attachments, the sponsoring underlying thoughts, and the not ready to receive are the things that make manifestation not work.
What you described about a yacht and not working when you want to use it, that's my experience with weed eaters and lawnmowers. Bob used the word hold. You used the word attachment. And I want to throw another one in there. Clinging. Clinging.
Mm-hmm.
Where, at what point is vulnerability neediness? When are we clinging to something instead of allowing? Clinging to the outcome, that attachment to the outcome, to things, to distractions, to
So we had a guy from the monastery come to one of my classes the other day, and it was talking about the tools you use to get to things. And but it kind of seems to apply here too, where at clingy you get so hung up on something that becomes, and that's another thing with manifestation. If I say I want money, I'm going to manifest the want for money. But you're talking about clinging, like you get so hung up on something that even when it comes, you still are trying to get more and more, and you're never satisfied. And he said a thing about that I was talking about the tools, but he said it's like if you have a boat and you need to get across the river, you put that boat in the water, you go across the river, you get out of the boat, and you carry on. You don't carry that boat with you. So I think the clinginess comes from where we get some portion of what we want, but it's never enough. We always want more. We always want more. We always want more. So I think actually accepting what you get and moving on is kind of something that you have to get used to. And then if it's not enough, reset your intention to kind of clarify it and make it greater.
clinging is the antithesis of vulnerability. Bob has been describing a very vulnerable state of sitting with pain. If I cling to an ideal of my identity, anything, it's a defense mechanism against vulnerability. So many of these things are, but to me, that just is so clear that it's another way of not being vulnerable. If I cling to my identity, if I cling to my beliefs, to my worldview, to my religion, to my politics, to my things, it's a way of not being vulnerable. I feel like if we really consider just how ultimately vulnerable we all are, it scares the fuck out of us. And sitting there with that, holding that, embracing that, honoring that, certainly not. We're just not taught to do that. We're not encouraged to do that
I
by
think
the
it's
world
something.
at large.
I think it goes back to something you said. I think it was before we started recording, though. Too, is that clinging to stuff is comfort. It's the dopamine hits. It's the person that stays in abusive relationship because they're used to it. So
Yeah,
the
familiar.
clinging is a defense mechanism and a reaction to you needing your body needing the same thing it's always gotten to provide comfort. Where if you even if it's a terrible thing like getting beaten, it's comfortable, and moving out of that is far more, you know, jolting than it is just to stay in something that's awful.
No
I think
matter how horrible the known is, it's the unknown that scares most of us far more. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for a number of years, I was president of the Domestic Violence Task Force, and that was after I'd been a victim advocate and after I was a domestic violence survivor. And because I was an advocate, then a survivor, I was so furious about what I was trained that was supposed to happen didn't happen, but which is a tale for another day. But I think that is such a great example of um, the necessity of vulnerability, because one of the things that we in advocacy circles that you stress is that someone who leaves that cycle of power and control, which is violence, or sometimes even a toxic relationship that doesn't include violence, when you break that power of control, you are never more vulnerable. It is the most dangerous time, but it's also the only avenue to true safety. It's like Michael, I think you used the word paradox. As I was thinking, especially having lived through it, when you walk someone through that time, and I had so much more access to resources. I met with state attorneys all the time. I knew law enforcement in every jurisdiction in my area when I needed to utilize those resources, and still, I was never more at risk than that time period after breaking that cycle. And I broke it early on. This wasn't a years long thing, but I think that's such a great example, though, because um, there is risk with vulnerability in some ways. It You could say, but there's also I just feel like I don't know how to say it, eloquently other than that. Um, Without that period of that transition, of that openness, of that being, a version of being vulnerable, that's the only avenue to freedom. Does
The
that make
the
sense?
same Chinese symbol is danger and opportunity. The
Mhm.
exact same and simultaneously. Go
Mhm.
ahead, Bob.
Oh, I was curious how what each of your answers would be to this. Uh, uh, it's what I hold that holds me. What would you
Mm.
like to have holding you? What do you want to have holding you? And the word attachment, and we're we can look at attachment in a different way, and secure attachment is the most, I believe, critical thing that any of us need is a secure attachment. You know, ideally with one of our primary caregivers. For many people, that becomes somebody else because they didn't get that, or they never stop looking for it, or maybe they find some of that in a therapeutic relationship or something related to their faith. Um, and with the IFS model, the I don't know if it's the goal, but nurturing secure attachment within, with that idea of the self.
Right.
If these parts of me that feel young or adolescent or angry or insecure or afraid, who do they want holding them? Right.
Right. Absolutely.
I was just thinking another like secure attachment, or another way of looking at it. I was had to Google to see, but the thing that came to mind was, there's a healthier form of attachment, like secure attachment, or like a symbiotic relationship versus a parasitic relationship. Both involve an attachment. One is leeching off, and parasite is leeching off of its host versus, circle of life, mutual exchange that happens. I was trying to look for a good example, but
Do you want to
I don't want to
be
scroll.
independent? Do you want to be codependent? Or do you want to
Mhm.
be interdependent?
That's what I was just thinking.
Yes.
I think I might have my one of my old supervisors. She had something framed that says we help people go from dependence to independence to interdependence.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on all three in some way.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like as much as I want to and experience and embrace interdependence, I feel like if I err is on the side of independence, too much, maybe perhaps independence. To answer your question, Bob, the two thoughts I had was when you said, "What do I want to be holding me?" I almost simultaneously was, and I can't even describe the love that I was envisioning, just being held by unconditional, divine love. And then simultaneously, I was like, I want to be holding me. I got it. I got me, and it was very self, with my two answers that came up to that question.
I think all of my practice really goes about inner peace. And I mean, love is a big part of that. I kind of am on the thing that love is all there is, ultimately, that everything else is fake. And it's trying to get rid of all that fake and find that inner peace and actually just live in love that really is kind of what everything I do as far as spiritual practices lead to, and keep uncovering things that are separating me from that peace and love that's there.
In a group I was doing today with young adults with disabilities, many of whom are autistic, one of the questions that came up was, if you could have any superpower, what would that be? And my response was something related to help bringing peace. To help bringing peace. And I guess healing is the same thing.
Yeah.
But as growing up, all the beauty contests, what do you want? I want world peace. And as I've gotten more spiritually mature, I realize that world peace is not even something to strive for, that there needs to be strife in the world for some people on karmic paths to deal with certain things that they have as far as intergenerational trauma and stuff. So that the idea of world peace seems good, but really is all we can search for is inner peace and peace in our immediate area. If that could be achieved, then there would be world peace.
Right.
But not everybody wants that. Some people need the trauma. Some people need the strife. And, war is a horrible thing to somebody seeking peace, but it's also a necessary catalyst to release a lot of the negative energy that's put into the world. And a lot of those people have been fighting over the same thing for generation. They're not actually trying to heal. They're just perpetuating a fight.
Right.
So, like I said, it seems counterintuitive, but world peace is not something I look for anymore. Inner peace is what I do. And like I said, if everybody did it, there would automatically be world peace.
When I hear world peace, I just picture peas like in a mixer.
Yes.
Whirling. World peas.
World.
You get one of those
I gotcha.
World
packages
peas.
that has peas from all over the world. Cook them together.
I was thinking world
Whirling,
peas.
yeah, whirling.
Whirling.
Zzz, in a blender, they're whirling peas.
Jennifer, you mentioned separation. Lack of vulnerability leads to separation. Of every, I don't even. I'm so far removed from this concept that I don't even. I can't even. Sin is not a part of my vocabulary, of my worldview, of my religious practice, of anything. But when it was, the greatest definition of sin I ever heard was separation. Anything that separates us from ourselves, separates us from others, separates us from God or the world or whatever. Lack of vulnerability leads to lack of, to that kind of separation.
But that's the thing, is ultimately there is no separation.
Right.
We're all from the same source. There's a concept in Kabbalah called Tzimtzum, which is Tzimtzum, but it's the contraction theory that if you believe there's an eternal God that is infinite, that source God would have been here before anything else. It would have filled all of infinity with whatever it's made of, and there would be no space for us. So in that concept, everything is created out of whatever that source material that God is. So everything that we see is that. So when you take it up to that higher level, that's what the unity is about, is that there is no separation. We're all inside of this one creator God, and there is no separation. It's all an illusion. I don't know. I spent a lot of time contemplating that theory, and it really actually got me to where I don't fear death anymore. I don't fear a lot of things anymore, because I feel like the ultimate end, no matter what path you take, is going to always lead back to the same source.
Previously, Jen, when you were speaking about instead of world peace, some of the conflict and how that can take people down their karmic path and things that recalled to my. I was thinking. I wonder. There's been times I wondered, would things have been? Normally, we would think, well, there's so many things that could have potentially been better had my father lived into old age, and was raised in an intact home, and that sort of thing. But then I wonder. I also think, like thinking of it in terms like you shared, because that happened, certainly there was some unhealthy coping and some different things that, I've had to heal from. But at the same time, and perhaps I would have always had this desire, but one of my strongest desires from at definitely that point was, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I wanted to be the person for others that I needed in those moments, and so when I'm in different class, grad school, people that like me that are veteran social workers, people that are new to the field that are questioning their life decisions, people that are stressed, like of course there's elements of self-care and things, but one of the things that I feel so secure in the decision that I made for in terms of a career is because it's definitely a strong desire, it's a passion that I have. And so while I would there's so many moments I would have loved to have shared with my father over the course of my life, and in the latter years of my life, I wouldn't say I'm grateful for that loss. I am grateful for the lessons and for the preparation that it was to connect with other people, to be in a place to serve other people. Same with being a survivor of domestic violence, being a hurricane survivor, being a single mom, being ethnically vague. There's, on the one hand, sometimes I've thought that I would not have chosen any of those things. On the other hand, the opportunity that the position it put me in to be a voice for others, to be an advocate, to be that person that I so could have, benefited from having in my life when others were in need. I feel like it's just an incredible gift to have been given,
So
as difficult as things have been.
You're an alchemist.
Yes.
And actually, it was so I've studied Kabbalah a bunch. It resonated with me, and I took a course, and it wasn't about path working and the tree of life and stuff, and I didn't like it. But then after I got into another course on that included the path working, I went back and listened to it again. And one of the things that I didn't even hear the first time was them talking about trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
a Kabbalistic view of trauma is that you come into this world with things to work on. You have a karmic path. So if we use you as an example, you came into this world with a fear of loss. And losing your father in an early age was that first manifestation
Mm-hmm.
of a trial to get that fear of loss out of your karmic path. And in the in that point of view, people that don't deal with it as well as you have are going to continue to experience loss, whether it's a job or a pet or a child, or they're just going to keep having continuous loss. And those are not things to cause trauma. Those are things caused by trauma to give you a chance to heal and move past
Mm-hmm.
that. So I think you're an excellent example of that falling into place, that you've taken something that's horrible and could be crippling for somebody and made it into a positive thing and let it shape you into the amazing counselor that you are today.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And then, in answer to Bob's question, my answers were very similar to Michael. I would like to hold on to. I would like love to hold me, and I would like Michael to hold me. But, and I say that not somewhat jokingly, but also genuinely, because over the course of my life, because when I first encountered Michael, I was 14, and when I had the opportunity to see, to see how he was as a leader in his, in his ministry role. One of the things that, as long as I've known Michael, that I appreciate so much about him, is the way that he just exudes love. And that is something that I've always desired to do. I don't know that, um, I would love to be I would love it to be said of me that I love the way Michael loves. Because, he, I think it's such a gift to give people, to be able to, when you, do embrace yourself, and as Michael, as you spoke of holding yourself, um, and taking care of yourself, in, being vulnerable and being authentic, and, stripping away those things that are external, and really, really, dealing with the internal, and continually growing in every way. It just positions you, at key points in other people's lives, to, whether it's a smile, whether it's the way that, like, I love something as simple as going through the drive-through with Michael in the driver's seat. I love seeing a stressed cashier, and he'll say something funny, and at first they kind of have that, one of these guys, right? But then when they see his face, I know they respond to the authenticity and that genuine love. Because, so, as Jennifer and I think it was all touched on, um, it is not some that vulnerability and that authenticity is, um, uncomfortable for some people, because we, in different for different ways, different reasons, we are coached and taught to put the best foot forward, put on a brave face. I mean, think of some of the things we're taught. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is such bullshit. Words do hurt.
Right.
They stick with you long. Scars, can be, battle stories. They can be a point of victory. Those, words can. I mean, I just think of some of the words that have stuck with me. That worked past as an adult, and I feel at this point like I'm rambling, but so I started out somewhat jokingly, but that's one of the things I do appreciate. And I would say that the more I get to know each of you, I think that's one of the things that, I appreciate, a value about you, is each of you is the way that, you embrace others. That vulnerability, that, genuineness that you have, that, you're just, it's not often that you could get a group of people together of any size where there's such a safe space, and that's something I, especially some of the things that I've, experienced over the course of my lifetime, I just value that so much. So,
You just take just a moment. I know we need to go pretty soon, but take just a moment and think about this. We're calling this journeys. Think about the journeys that led us to this moment,
yeah.
to us as a group, to us as the way we're
Mm-hmm.
relating and connecting. what are the chances? The Big Bear and Wee Hitchka hooking up, like that's so. It's a gift. It's truly incredible.
Yeah.
I want to. A friend of mine, posted on January 2nd. He said, "I just got my first circle back." Because somebody sent him an email that said, "Hey, I wanted to circle back to, but I want to circle back to something for a moment, because I didn't mention it earlier, but." And then we'll give everybody a chance to, we'll wrap it up. You say whatever else you want to, and then we'll close for tonight. I think this has been tremendous, and thank y'all so much. But I'm not I don't want to say this as overly negative or anti anything. I just want you to think about, I'm asking us to think about, I want to go back to Jimmy Carter. He's one of my favorite people. I mean, when I think about the leaders in my lifetime, or almost lifetime, Dr. King and Jimmy Carter are way up there among all, there's others, but whew. And if you think about what I was talking about earlier, about the vulnerability he exuded and expressed, and his openness and his leadership style, it was not the I'm going to overwhelm you or overpower you, and I'm not going to have all the answers. And who did we as a nation choose when we rejected him? An actor who projected power and authority and answers. And one of the commentaries I read way back when was, in terms of worldview, Reagan had a worldview. He had a worldview in the similar sense. And again, I'm not trying to be overly negative about him or making this overly political, but just think about how many of us are the same way. He had a worldview, like so many do when it comes to religion or politics or anything else, that answers everything. There are no questions, because the worldview, there's already an answer there for it.
Say no.
Carter, what's that?
Say no.
Yeah. Just say no.
Yeah.
Carter was more open, more, let's figure it out, let's talk, let's have an exchange. I think if it's not the majority of the people on the planet, I think it's probably close to it, that want answers, that want the fake security of someone saying, I have all the answers. Is we see it in religious leaders, political leaders, family leaders, business, corporate leaders. I have the answers. All you have to do is follow me. That's anti-vulnerability. And it is absolutely fear-based, the opposite of love. And thinking of that, I think in this cyclical process, I think we're at a moment that's very similar, very reminiscent of that. And not just because the inflation under Carter led to Reagan, and the inflation under Biden was one of the things, in both cases, one of the things that has now led to Trump and where we are. But the longer I live and the more I witness and see, the more I appreciate Jimmy Carter in so many ways. So just wanted to circle back to that. Anyone else want to say anything and share anything else before we wrap it up? Bob's got to go to bed because he got to get up early again.
Somebody shared a billboard. We have a billboard here in town that's, has Carter's image and birth, 1924, 1924. But there was another billboard that someone shared where it had a picture of him and it had the word character.
Yes.
But it had bolded C, not H, A-R, no C, T-E-R.
Wow.
I thought that was cool.
Beautiful. Incredible.
I'll tell you what, I feel like I was given a gift in my transition because am I've a completely different person than I was 4 years ago, like in almost everything, the way I work, my political views. And Carter and Reagan was my first election I remember.
Hmm.
And my grandparents were very big Carter supporters. And I don't know, 5 or 6 probably. I was young. I don't know exactly what it was. I may have been in my teens. I don't know. But I was young because I was cheering. I took the counterpoint and I was like, go Reagan. I didn't know anything about politics, but I cheered for Reagan. And I grew up a conservative, a very, very staunch conservative. And but I was unhappy with myself and I didn't care about people and I cared about money and I cared about everything. So I was fiscally conservative. I didn't care about the social issues. And I've had to do a lot of analysis of that because I was like, why was I like that? But, I, at 48, right when I transitioned, like I said, I was on the verge of suicide. I mean, so here I was a white male. I wasn't doing well. I looked like I had everything. I had a big house and a BMW and a wife and 2 kids, and I was a member of the church. And like, I looked like the perfect person, but here I was on the verge of dying because I couldn't cope. So hearing somebody say, we're going to give breaks to minorities and we're going to give breaks to women and we're going to give breaks to everybody. And here I am dying. And I'm like, well, what about me? And I
Hmm.
think that's where a lot of the divide comes from, is that there are people struggling out there.
Right.
And it's not that don't, you know, they don't care about people, but they don't have the ability to care for people because they're in such struggle there. And I think that's a big thing.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
I think Carter actually represented that love of people and the care for humanity. And he's demonstrated that so well since he left office,
Right.
where a lot of the conservative platform has been a social war, a social, war on different people. And I would have never looked at it had they not started attacking trans people. And everything they said about it, I looked at and I'm like, that's not me and that's not anybody I know.
Right.
So it was kind of a gift where now I can see both sides and I don't blame anybody for anything. I'm not staunch one way or the other. I voted for my first Democrat in, you know, 2022, 2 years ago. My mom was more disappointed about that than she was that I transitioned, which is just crazy to me. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So I mean, politics is one of those weird things, but like you said, it's like the church is the same way. People don't want
yeah.
to think. They want to be told who the
Right.
enemy
Hmm.
is. They want to be told
Hmm.
what the solution is, and they'll buy anything. They don't really put creative things, and that kind of goes to the Hermetic view of creation. That the first God that was created in the Hermetic view of creation was fate, and everybody fell under fate. And without consciousness and intention and a connection with Source, they were destined to do what's ever fated. And that's what most people live, and that's why they buy into all this stuff and just take one thing or the other without critical
Right.
thinking.
Mm.
I was thinking when you talk about in terms of equality and equity and versus status, that that's part of, I think, a vulnerability that there's a tendency to resist, because if there are certain protections in conforming to particular groups or particular ways of thinking, particular political parties or whatever, where the division may be. And that's like um, some of my graduate school and just some of the research I've learned over the years about some of the pushback there is. When we are on the one hand, we say we're trying to work toward equality, but that means is that recognition of like that there's a status that I think there's a perception I have to give up some of my status
Right.
for you to be equal, but that's not what, that's really not the case. But, that would require willingness for groups to be vulnerable and, open and to not hold on to, to certain things that give us a false sense of security. And sometimes there's some practical security, you know.
The entire concept of hell
Mm-hmm.
is for the other. Nobody who believes in hell believes they're going. It's
Right.
for their enemies.
Nobody's trying to get there. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, we really appreciate that ethnically vague response. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Non-dualistic. It's non-dualistic. I like it. I like it and I don't like it at the same time. Wait a second.
I remember we were having a conversation about, political correctness and at work years ago, and about some issues that had to do with ethnicity and that sort of thing. And one of my coworkers said, "Well, now I don't know whether to be offended or not." So I took the office door and kind of hid half of me behind. I said, "We only have to be half offended." But this is why I'm a social worker, not a comedian.
I got it.
Yeah, no, we got it. Yeah,
I got it.
Bob, you feel like closing us out? We got a few last words for us as we wrap up tonight? And you don't have to, but I just
I Jasmine brought to mind this cultural sensitivity group orientation that I got involved in college, a retreat and stuff like that. Mind opening. I remember the one of the main leaders was an African American man, and if I just remember somebody asking him a question, and this happened more than once. Somebody asking him a question, and he did this, no, or he did this, yes.
Yeah. That's great.
We have the Indian head bobble. I don't know if you've ever worked with Indian people, but they have a tendency to shake their head like this, and they'll be like, "Yes, Todd." My boss is Todd. "Yes, Todd." He's like, "Is that yes or no?" I really yes or no, because you're shaking your head like this. It's kind of a circle.
Wow.
There we go. That's a good spot. It's kind of a
Absolutely.
circle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's kind of a circle.
Yep.
All right. I'm grateful to be part of this tonight, guys.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. I wondered if there was. First of all, I want to invite y'all to Jasmine and I will be playing